The royal guards are some of the most famous figures around the world, known for their incredibly serious and disciplined demeanor. These guards stand watch outside places like Buckingham Palace, ensuring that no harm comes to the royal family or the important landmarks they protect. To anyone visiting these places, the guards appear almost like statues, motionless, unblinking, and entirely focused on their duty. Visitors from all corners of the world gather to see these sentinels, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous changing of the guard ceremony. For years, these guards have been the subject of fascination. Their posture is perfect, their uniforms spotless, and their expressions completely neutral. The idea behind this is not just tradition but also discipline. The royal guards are trained to stand still for long periods of time, without showing any emotion. Whether it's sunny, rainy, hot, or cold, they remain unchanged. They don't smile, they don't speak to passers-by, and they don't react to anything around them. It's a remarkable feat of focus and control. People sometimes forget that these guards, in their grand uniforms and imposing postures, are human too. But the rules of their job don't leave any room for emotions to show. They are part of a long-standing tradition, one that has been in place for hundreds of years. Their mission goes far beyond simply standing in front of the palace. It's a symbol of strength, loyalty, and history. The royal family depends on them for protection, and the public relies on them as symbols of continuity and stability. When you look closely at a royal guard, you can't help but notice their immovable focus. They never seem distracted, even when the crowds around them grow larger and louder. Kids try to get their attention, waving their hands or making funny faces. Tourists take photos, sometimes standing right in front of them for minutes on end. But no matter how many people gather, the guards remain calm and unwavering like statues. It's an impressive sight to see, and it's easy to assume that they're simply not allowed to react to anything after all. They are there to do a job, and they do it well. But while the public admires their discipline, there's something even more fascinating about the royal guards that most people don't realize. Beneath those serious faces and perfectly pressed uniforms, these guards have stories to tell. Some of them have been in the army for years, serving in dangerous locations, facing challenges that most people could never imagine. Others have served through tough personal struggles, but still, they come to their post every day, standing tall, performing their duties without fail. The idea of royal guards is rooted in respect, duty, and a sense of history that has been passed down through generations. In the midst of all the attention, the guards are sometimes forgotten as people, with their own lives and experiences outside of their uniforms. For those who know the history and the sacrifices that come with the role, it's easy to see the humanity behind the strict military posture. These are individuals who have made a commitment to one of the most important roles in the world, and yet they rarely get to show anything other than what they've been trained to show: their resolve, their loyalty, and their focus on the job at hand. For years, the image of the royal guards remained unchanged. Visitors to London, tourists from across the globe, and even locals who pass by daily all came to expect that the guards would stand silent and unmoving, embodying an almost mythological sense of dedication. They were a symbol of British history, a reminder of a time long past when the royal family's safety was a matter of life and death. This image of the silent sentinel became iconic, and with it came an almost impossible standard. The guards had to be perfect in their role, without showing any hint of weakness or imperfection. But despite the intense pressure to maintain this unflinching exterior, something extraordinary happened one day that no one could have predicted. While the royal guards were doing their usual job, standing watch in front of Buckingham Palace, something shifted. A small child, no older than 5 or 6, broke through the crowd. She was wearing a bright pink dress, holding a stuffed bear in one hand, and her eyes were wide with curiosity as she looked up at the royal guard standing at attention. The little girl didn't seem to understand the unspoken rule of never approaching the guards. She simply ran towards him, giggling as she got closer, completely unaware of the serious nature of the situation. The guard, who had been standing perfectly still, made an unexpected move. Instead of maintaining his strict position or even turning away, he broke character just for a moment. He bent down, offering the child a warm, kind smile, and gave her a brief wave of his hand. For a few seconds, the world seemed to pause. The tourists around him stopped, surprised by the sudden shift. Cameras clicked and people whispered in awe. It wasn't the usual cold, stiff interaction they had come to expect. In that instant, the guard showed a side of himself that was rarely seen. He wasn't just a soldier following orders. He was a human being who could appreciate the joy of a child. The crowd erupted in applause, and the little girl's parents looked on, grateful for the unexpected kindness their daughter had just experienced. It was a rare moment that left a lasting impression on those who witnessed it. The guard's unexpected act of kindness had broken the rigid barrier of his role, proving that even the most disciplined, serious individuals could have moments of warmth and humanity. It was a lesson that many would take with them long after they had left the palace gates. This moment, although brief, was a perfect reminder that there is more to the royal guards than meets the eye. It was a fleeting yet significant glimpse into the personalities of these men and women who serve with such dedication. It showed that while they may be bound by duty and tradition, they are not immune to showing respect and kindness when the situation calls for it. And for the audience who witnessed this event, it became clear that the royal guards, despite their stoic exterior, were not so different from anyone else. They too had the capacity to be gentle, kind, and human. The scene that had just unfolded in front of Buckingham Palace was something no one had expected. The moment the guard smiled at the little girl, the crowd gasped. For a brief second, everyone's eyes were locked on him as if trying to process what had just happened. The guard, who had been a perfect image of military discipline and tradition, had just broken character. It was a fleeting moment of kindness, but it sent ripples through the crowd, leaving people talking about it for hours. The guards are known for their unshakable composure. Every day they stand tall, guarding the royal palace, doing their duty without any distraction. It's a job that demands perfection, no movement, no sound, and certainly no interaction with the public. But in that moment, the guard had done something no one could have predicted. He had shown a glimpse of what lay beneath his serious exterior, a heart capable of kindness. The reaction from the crowd was immediate. People who had been observing the guards for years couldn't believe what they had just seen. The little girl had only wanted to wave at the guard, but what had followed was so much more than anyone could have imagined. It wasn't just a smile or a wave. It was an acknowledgement of the joy in that moment. It was something many hadn't realized the guard could give. For the tourists and locals watching, this was a rare experience. They had always viewed the royal guards as distant figures, part of the pageantry of British history, but seemingly beyond the reach of ordinary people. To them, the guards had been like statues, stoic, unchanging, and untouchable. They were symbols of the monarchy and its traditions. They were not supposed to show emotions. They were supposed to be untiring, unwavering, and perfect in every way. But on this particular day, the guard had shown that there was more to the job than just standing still. The interaction with the little girl was a simple act, but it broke through the walls of protocol and tradition, giving everyone around a rare and beautiful glimpse into the humanity of these seemingly cold figures. It was like seeing a famous painting come to life, a brief but magical moment that left a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. As the crowd slowly began to move on, the little girl and her family left. Their day made all the more special by the encounter with the royal guard, but something had changed for the people still standing nearby. For some, this moment of unexpected kindness gave them a new perspective on the guards. They no longer saw them as just soldiers in fancy uniforms standing silently on duty. Instead, they saw them as real people, individuals capable of small, meaningful gestures that could brighten someone's day. But it wasn't just the tourists who had seen the guards' act of kindness. The guards themselves, those who stood at attention every day, were now faced with the challenge of balancing their strict duties with the humanity they had just witnessed. The moment had shown everyone that even in the most formal roles, there was room for compassion and respect for others. As the weeks went by, more people came to witness the changing of the guard ceremony. They had heard about the moment with the little girl, and many arrived at the palace hoping to see something similar. But the guards were careful not to repeat that exact interaction. They were, after all, still bound by their duty. Still, something had shifted. The public's perception of them had changed, and in turn, the guards began to feel a little less like statues and a little more like people. During one particularly busy afternoon, as the crowds gathered for another changing of the guard ceremony, something else unexpected happened. This time it was an elderly woman who had been waiting in the sun for hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous ceremony. As the heat wore on, the woman began to feel faint. She held onto a nearby fence, her face pale and her hands trembling. It was clear she wasn't feeling well, and she looked like she might faint any moment. One of the guards stationed nearby noticed her immediately. Instead of ignoring the situation or simply continuing his duties, he made a quick decision. He stepped away from his post, a slight shift in his usual stance, and approached the woman. With his face still serious, he asked her if she needed help. She nodded weakly, and the guard gently assisted her, guiding her to a nearby bench. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a public display. It was simply a moment of kindness, a brief pause in his routine to make sure someone else was okay. For the people who were close by, it was another shock. They had never seen a guard step away from his post before, especially not for something as personal as helping a stranger. Yet there he was, standing by the elderly woman, ensuring she was safe and comfortable. The moment didn't last long, but it was significant. The guard's small act of compassion stood in stark contrast to his rigid, formal role. As the elderly woman regained her strength, she smiled at the guard, a look of gratitude in her eyes. He nodded back, offering a silent acknowledgement. It wasn't a scene filled with fanfare or applause, but the exchange spoke volumes. It was a moment that showed not just the guard's duty to his position, but his respect for others and his awareness of the world beyond his uniform. By now, the reputation of the Royal Guards was beginning to change. It was no longer just about their flawless performance or their military discipline. It was also about their ability to connect with others in quiet, meaningful ways. These guards were still the silent sentinels of the palace, still the protectors of the royal family. But they had now become symbols of something more. Symbols of respect, kindness, and the ability to break character when the moment called for it. The little girl had reminded the world that these men and women weren't just soldiers. The elderly woman had shown that even the most disciplined among us could have moments of human compassion. And as the days went by, more and more people began to see the Royal Guards in a new light. They were not just figures who stood still and looked serious. They were people who had hearts, who cared, and who could, in the smallest of ways, make a big difference in the lives of others. It was a shift in perspective that many people would carry with them for a long time. The idea that the Royal Guards, despite their rigid duties and stoic faces, were capable of showing empathy and kindness was a revelation. It made people appreciate not just the ceremony, but the people behind the uniforms. And in the quiet moments when the crowds had dispersed and the guards stood once again at their posts, there was a deeper understanding between the Royal Guards and those who watched them. It wasn't just about tradition anymore. It was about something more profound, about being human. As the days went by and the crowds continued to gather outside Buckingham Palace to witness the changing of the guard, something incredible happened. The moments of kindness and respect shown by the Royal Guards seemed to have caught the attention of everyone who passed by. The more the public witnessed these rare acts of humanity, the more they began to understand that there was much more to the guards than their ceremonial duties. What was once seen as a strict and rigid tradition now seemed to have layers of compassion hidden beneath the surface. One afternoon, as the sun blazed down on the crowds gathered to see the ceremony, something completely unexpected happened that would further change the public's perception of the Royal Guards. The day had been unusually hot, and the large number of visitors milling around had begun to grow restless in the heat. As the guards prepared for the changing of the guard, something caught their attention. A loud commotion broke out near the fence, and a young tourist, perhaps a little too excited about seeing the Royal Guards, had slipped and fallen to the ground. At first, it seemed like a minor accident. The crowd around the tourist was still moving, and many people continued to watch the ceremony. But then it became clear that the tourist, a teenage boy, had hurt his leg when he had fallen. He looked shocked, his face pale with pain. He tried to stand up, but the pain was too much. He winced and sat back down, unable to move. The onlookers, unsure of what to do, paused, and it was then that one of the Royal Guards stationed nearby broke his usual stance. The guard, who had been standing perfectly still, stepped forward, his boots clicking loudly on the pavement. The crowd grew quiet, sensing that something different was about to happen. Instead of continuing with his duties and ignoring the situation like the crowd expected, the guard approached the boy with a calm and purposeful stride. Without a word, the guard crouched down next to the boy, asking him if he was okay in a gentle but firm voice. The boy, still in pain, nodded but couldn't stand up. The guard then helped him to his feet, supporting him as he carefully made sure the young tourist could walk without putting too much pressure on his injured leg. For a brief moment, the guard stood there, offering the boy reassurance. In a very calm voice, he told the teenager that help was on the way. The guard then looked around at the nearby staff and pointed toward the medical team stationed just a short distance away. As soon as the medical team arrived, the guard stepped back, returning to his post without saying another word. The boy was helped to the first aid station, and the crowd, which had been holding its breath during the brief exchange, slowly began to relax. The guard's actions were so uncharacteristic, so different from what anyone expected of him, that it left many people stunned. The entire interaction had been brief, but it made an impact. The Royal Guard had broken character once again, but this time it wasn't just a smile or a small gesture. He had taken action when someone was in need. His decision to break his usual silence, to step out of his formal role and to help someone in distress was a clear demonstration of his humanity. For those who had witnessed it, the image of the guard helping the injured tourist would remain etched in their minds. They had seen firsthand that the guards were not just symbols of military tradition. They were real people who, when needed, could show kindness and empathy in a moment of crisis. The tourists who had been near the injured boy couldn't stop talking about the incident. Some praised the guard for his quick thinking and calm composure, while others marveled at how someone so serious could break free from his role to help a stranger. It was clear that the guard's action had challenged the public's expectations and made them rethink everything they thought they knew about the Royal Guards. As the day went on, more visitors arrived, hoping to see the changing of the guard ceremony, but they had heard about the recent event and began asking the staff if it was true that the guards had shown kindness and care. People were eager to hear about it, and soon the story of the Royal Guard helping the tourists spread far beyond the gates of the palace. News outlets picked up the story, and social media buzzed with reactions from those who had seen it. What struck everyone the most was how such a small act of kindness had reverberated through the crowd. People who had never thought twice about the guards began to reconsider their roles in society. They were no longer seen as merely soldiers performing a ceremonial job. They were viewed as protectors in a broader sense, not just in terms of physical security, but also in terms of the emotional well-being of those around them. The Royal Guards had always been symbols of duty, tradition, and discipline, but in that moment, they were also symbols of compassion and kindness. People saw the guards as individuals who could make a difference in the lives of others, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. The guards' actions showed that even the most formal of roles could allow for moments of humanity to shine through. As time went on, the guards continued with their duties, but something had changed. The public's perception had shifted. No longer were they just the rigid soldiers in uniform. Now people saw them as men and women who, though dedicated to their roles, could step out of their comfort zones and show kindness when it mattered most. The little moments, like the guard helping the injured tourist or smiling at the little girl, started to reshape the image of what it meant to be a Royal Guard. For the guards themselves, the experience was also transformative. They were no longer just performing a job. They had become a part of the public's lives, showing that it was possible to balance tradition and humanity. While they still followed their duties with the same level of seriousness and professionalism, they understood that there was value in the simple acts of kindness that could brighten someone's day. This realization didn't change the nature of their job, but it did offer a new layer of depth to the role they played in society. The Royal Guards, often seen as the face of tradition, had become symbols of something far more meaningful. Their actions proved that even in the most disciplined of roles, there is always room for respect, understanding, and kindness. As the years went on, the story of the Royal Guard's unexpected acts of humanity would continue to inspire those who saw them. People left Buckingham Palace with a newfound appreciation for the Guards, and they would never again look at them as just statues. The Royal Guards had shown the world that duty and kindness could coexist, and that in a world often focused on perfection and discipline, the smallest acts of humanity could have the greatest impact.